Hello, let's begin. Activate system coherence. Good. So we open up with a tilting line, something transecting a larger bubble. The sensation is as though the bubble is all around me, and there should be a line going through the very center of it. It should be toroidal in shape. But that line is a little bit too far forward. It's about where my hands are, where instead it should be in the center where my body is. Something is shifted forward, and it's at this tilting line angle, like so. Tilting lines representative of emotional patterns. Concept psycho-emotional energetics, coined by Dr. Richard Bartlett. A moment in time when the program that is running was given something that it was not prepared for, and it caused a faulty blip within the rendering of what you may be experiencing right now. When working with these sort of things, there is no capacity to choose what changes. There's just the capability to initiate change. It isn't up to me what changes, because I'm not the one writing the story. I'm just here attempting to get the story back on track. We do that by paying attention to this transecting line and noticing that as I give it my attention, my awareness moves to different aspects of where it is moving tactily in space. And then it begins to change. For example, now it's going this way. Straight up, like a whirlpool, straight up, open on both ends. The central point is about here, still in front of the body. It transects backwards and winds up the back of the skull. It stops here at the top of the head. Specific acupuncture point. Governing vessel 21, governing vessel 20. Governing vessel 20 can have a lot of different points to do with memory, something about memory going on right now. Something about memory, clarity of memory, something in our capacity to recall, the way that we're recalling something. That point is beginning to ache, and that tilting line is moving towards the center, but only the bottom half of the vortex is moving towards the center. The top part is still in front of my face. The bottom half is moving towards the center, a little bit above where you would expect the lower dantian to be. It's whirling in a counterclockwise direction. Counterclockwise direction implies that we're processing something. Something is moving through the field of the body in order to be purged, essentially, before we can then process what's behind that information. But it's still not lined up, so there's a kink in the pipe. What's trying to be purged is not capable of being purged right now. We need a bit more information about this. So the kink in the toroidal loop, the kink in the center of the toroid, is as a result of our memory of something being, I don't want to say faulty, more like we're missing perspectives. Anything and everything is possible. In all moments, there's an infinite potential amount of perspectives that are available to you, getting locked on to one is not the most useful thing to do. It gets us stuck when you are absolutely certain that what you are perceiving is true in your perspective of whatever true means to you, whatever you consider fact, then you lock that in, and the program has no choice but to show you what it is that you're so absolutely certain of. There are times when this can be helpful, and then there are times when it is not. Increased textural sensation around my left ear, circling here. Something physical. So let's talk about bone. Let's talk about muscle. Let's talk about meridian. Let's talk about fascia. Something about fascia around that area. Surface level. Okay, so deeper. So we're talking about dura mater. So the fascia, the dura, which is the sac that contains your brain and your spinal cord. Your brain and your spinal cord float in cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid stays around your brain and spinal cord. It doesn't evenly distribute throughout the rest of your body because it's contained within a sac, a bag, if you will, in the center of your skull and down your spine. That bag is called the dura mater. Something about the dura mater as it adheres towards the inner portions of the skull, surrounding the temporal bone specifically right now. Temporal bone overlays language centers of the brain. Something about this is relevant, which means that it's about the way that we're phrasing our perspective of what happened to us in the past. So the words that we're using to dictate the way that things happened is cementing a perspective. We're seeing a belief that is not true, right? But we've decided that it's true, so now there's no other option but for us to accept it as true over time. We keep seeing it over time, and because we've accepted it as true, everyone else and everything else in our reality seems to agree with that, but it isn't real, right? It's just the way that we're viewing it. So let's take the way that we're viewing it and wind it the other way. Turn it on its head. Just change directions. Little tiny cavitations inside of my skull. That was a good sensation. That was pleasant. Something moves towards the middle. The toroid, the central line of the toroid, is now even, but not here, not in the middle portion of the body. In the middle of the portion of the body, it's still forward, but in the head and the stomach, it has moved back here. My attention is still in the center of my head here. Something going on in the center of the head, another dural piece, something else going on with the dura mater here. But it's right in the center. Interesting. Something going on around the foramen magnum. So you have a skull, foramen magnum, the hole at the bottom of the skull, also surrounded by dura mater. Something about a tension that's occurring in the aspect of your bag that contains your brain inside of your skull and your spinal cord that runs down your physical spine, the bony part of your back. Something about a tension occurring in that bag right here as it attaches into the periosteum of the skull. I'm holding this. Seems useful. Again, this is something that I learned specifically from my teacher, Dr. Richard Bartlett, at his In Deep seminars. Seems to be a compression that's happening here. I'm not thinking, but my hands are landing places on their own, specifically between the frontal bone and the occipital bone, and there's something of my fingers wanting to come together here, like that. Yeah. So we're kind of stretching the skull out this way. And the facial bones want to follow, but there's something that's preventing them from doing so. The maxilla wants to come forward, sort of like we're creating space right now for that to happen. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this on my own skull, so I'm gonna place my tongue on the roof of my mouth and just try to push it forward here, try to push the maxilla forward here. Okay, good. Significant release at the base of my neck. Hands move. Still something going on here. Something going on inside. So the sphenoid bone, this little red guy in the middle, is what your eyeballs sit on top of. My thumb and my middle finger seem to anchor in right here. Something important that we get towards the back side of it, which is uncommon. Usually we go in through the temples, but in this case it wants to come through the inside, which makes me think something that we're incapable of accessing through the temples. And I'm right underneath this hooked part. Something, it just kind of wants to move up the skull here. So let's bring it up. Good, more cavitations inside of the skull. Little tiny movements, little tiny cracks and pops and sounds. Hands seem to want to set this down, so we'll let them do that. I'm still not in the center of my body. The toroid, the center of the toroid, the vortex in the center of the toroid is still not in the center of the body throughout the torso. It is in the area of the lower dantian. It is in my head, the area of the upper dantian, but there's still something going on with the middle that is keeping it outside of the body. There's no longer any tension at the base of my skull, though. That's quite nice. That's quite a relief. It's almost like, it feels like a projection of my whole body is forward in that direction, like I'm arching my back and puffing my chest out way too much, and it's causing a loop where my entire body is like arched that way. That's what it feels like is happening underneath my skin, like there's a texture of that happening. That's very strange. So in my mind's eye, it's like a jump rope, or you skip rope and the loop goes like around like that. That's happening in this area that feels like it's looped out here. It's going now around the back of the body like that, and it's spinning now in a clockwise direction, and the entire toroid inside is spinning in a clockwise direction, which implies that the flow, the current of the toroid is now moving upward, rather than when we're processing things, it tends to be moving downward and counterclockwise. When instead we're integrating information, it tends to move upwards and in a clockwise direction. So we're moving in the right direction. We're just still waiting for, okay, I see it. So it's donut shaped. It's squashed like this. The toroid should be spherical, not exactly. It is a donut-like shape, but it shouldn't be donut. It should be sphere with a vortex in the middle. So right now we're squished, and what would it look like if we were not horizontally squished right now? Okay. I believe that's all that I have for you today. I hope that was beneficial, and I'll see you next time.